It must be time to start.
Evidently, yeah.
Hi,
Good morning, Sylvia. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Was that your clock that was so loud?
No, I shut mine off. I think that was Linnell.
Oh, okay. That's why Linnell's covering her eyes.
We can't shut it off. If we do, it stops. So that's fine.
Oh, okay.
I've tried shutting her off and didn't do any good.
All right, according to Linnell's clock, it's time to start. So thank you, Linnell, for that.
Certainly.
And it's pretty accurate. It cuckooed about the time my computer said 9 a.m. So we're continuing our lesson series on Joseph understanding God's promise, and this will be week 6. Genesis chapter 32, 138, grappling with guilt. Joseph's brothers who were guilty of selling him into slavery there in Egypt now will have the opportunity to meet up with him again, unknowingly to meet up with him again because of the situation in the world at that time, that is the desperate search for food. So let's go with our video, 90 seconds.
Guilt is difficult to fix. Past sins, big and small, can hinder forgiveness and reconciliation in our lives. For 20 years, Joseph's brothers carried the guilt of selling him into slavery. Shame and regret replaced their youthful bravado, and guilt ruled their troubled minds. As famine spreads throughout the land, Jacob sends his sons to Egypt to buy grain. There they encounter Joseph, who sees that his brothers don't recognize him. When they ask him for grain, Joseph speaks gruffly to them, accusing them of being spies. Their first thought, God is finally going to punish them. They counter Joseph's accusations, saying, "We are honest men. We are 12 brothers. The youngest is with our father, and one is no more." Joseph insists on seeing Benjamin, demanding they return with Benjamin to prove their honesty. Terrified, the brothers know their father Jacob will not let Benjamin out of his sight. Overwhelmed with remorse, amongst themselves they say, "We are guilty for what we did to Joseph. This is why distress has come upon us." Understanding their words, Joseph turns away and weeps as they leave for Canaan. Join us as we see Joseph's brothers face the long overdue consequences for their actions and how Joseph plots his response.
Okay, Joseph visits his brothers in Egypt, Genesis 42. Okay, so why did the brothers have to go to Egypt? Because of the famine that was predicted in Pharaoh's dream and interpreted by Joseph, that there were 7 years of plenty, and then that would be followed by 7 years of famine. And the Egyptians prepared for this 7 years by being taxed 1/5 of the grain during the years of plenty, and then that would be in storage to cover the years of famine. And the years of plenty were so plentiful that the grain was so numerous, they stopped counting it. So when the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opens up all the storehouses and sells to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Now that's unusual. Generally, when there's famine, Egypt is the place of refuge, and the nations go to go to Egypt then for food. But now this famine was so severe, it covered not only land of Canaan, but also the land of Egypt. All the earth came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain because the famine was so severe. So Joseph's brothers go to Egypt. So Jacob learns, of course, Jacob and the family there in Hebron, they're suffering from this famine like everyone else. He learns that there's grain for sale in Egypt. And he says to his brothers, why do you look at one another? So he probably learns of the grain for sale in Egypt from those caravans that go back and forth between Egypt and Gilead. And he says to his sons, why do you look at one another? Or what we would say today is probably, why are you just standing there? Do something. Which is close to what the Good News Bible says in chapter 42. Why don't you do something? And he says to them, I've heard there's grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us that we may live and not die. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. So it's clear from this that they are buying grain just for the people. They have lots of livestock, but apparently they still can graze, they can get by. But they're buying grain for the household here. And we learn later on that us here is about 70 people. That's the people that will, in about a year and a half, be going to Egypt. So they're going down to Egypt to buy grain to feed 70 people so that they may live and not die. So the 10 brothers go down, and then we learn if there's 10 brothers going down, then this would have to include Judah. We read earlier, the second lesson, that Judah had departed from his family and was living by himself a few miles away, but he rejoins the family at this time because of the predicament, and then he goes to Egypt with his brothers. But Jacob would not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, and he feared that harm might happen to him. Well, if harm's going to happen to him, it's probably going to happen to the other 10 brothers as well. And notice here that it describes the brothers as describes their relationship to Joseph rather than the relationship to Jacob. He sends Joseph's brothers as opposed to he sends his sons. But then in verse 5, the sons of Israel came to buy. So now we've got the relationship to Israel rather than Joseph. But they came among others who came to buy. So it's not only the Canaanites, not only Jacob's family, but others also came to Egypt to buy grain because the famine was so severe in the land. But we see here when Jacob sends his family here, the sons of Israel, in about a year and a half during the second year of the famine, not only the 12 sons, but all 70 people will enter Egypt. In about a year and a half, 430 years later, the sons of Israel emerge as the nation of Israel, and about thousands of people come out of Egypt. So it is in Egypt that these 70 then become a nation of hundreds of thousands of people. All right, so here's an Egyptian sunk relief of a little bit earlier than the time here, showing the effects of the famine. As famine consumes the land, Joseph's father, Jacob, encounters the same decision that his grandfather, Abraham, faced so many years before. Either go to Egypt and purchase food or face starvation in the land of promise. But I don't think God really would have let them starve if they stayed there, because he had to fulfill his promise to make a great nation out of Abraham. But unlike Abraham, Jacob did not solve the dilemma by moving his entire household to Egypt. Perhaps remembering God's warning to Isaac against traveling to Egypt during a time of famine, Jacob only sends 10 of his 11 sons to buy grain in Egypt and then bring the grain back to Canaan. So instead of going to Egypt and eating there, they're bringing grain back and then we'll be eating it at home. But we see this relief here and effects of starvation And you see how skinny this Egyptian's hand is here, sort of depiction of the 97-pound weakling. You get the idea that this Egyptian is not eating very well. Still haunted by the loss of Joseph, after about 20 years, Jacob keeps Benjamin, his youngest son, and Joseph's full brother home with him because he feared that harm would come to him. Genesis 42:4. As Rachel's second son, Benjamin ascended to the position of favorite after Jacob's loss of Joseph. Yet Jacob's concern for Benjamin's safety may have been excessive, because Benjamin was likely now at this point in his early 20s. He's older than Joseph was when Jacob sends him alone on about a 4-day trip to find his brothers, tending the flocks in Shechem. Jacob responds to the loss of Joseph by restricting Benjamin's freedom. Afraid of losing his last connection to Rachel, he would not allow his youngest son out of his immediate care. And you got to believe that, the family is facing starvation, that Benjamin, now in his early 20s, would want to go with his brothers. That's one additional person to go, some additional donkeys. They could bring back more grain. So he must have been very disappointed when his father would not allow him to go with his brothers. Now Joseph was governor over the land of Egypt. He was governor, vizier, whatever, second in charge over all the land of Egypt. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. Now it makes it sound like Joseph and Joseph alone is taking care of this, people coming in from the northeast, south, and west, and all over. I don't think it means literally that he was the only one that did it. It reminds me of Jethro's charge to his son-in-law, Moses, when he says, son, what you're doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You're not able to do this alone, take care of all this. Look for able-bodied men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over. I think that Joseph here was the one who was in charge, but he had overseers under him, selling the grain to the people in the different areas, the northeast, the south, and the west. So Joseph's brothers come and bow themselves before him with their faces to the ground. So Joseph saw the brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. Where do you come from, he says. Well, he knows very well where they came from. He's just testing them. They said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. So this pretty much sets it in place. So Joseph now fully realizes that these are his brothers who have now come, bowing themselves before him with their faces to the ground, sort of like what happened in a dream so many years ago. So here we have the brothers bowing down to him. Joseph, Genesis 42 recalls many of the details from the beginning of the Joseph story back in Genesis 37. As Joseph's brothers prostrate themselves to him in Egypt, we can recall the stalks of wheat that bowed down to Joseph in his youthful dream back there in Genesis 37. Standing before his humble brothers, Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them, and his life has come full circle, past and present, connecting. Although he'd been absent from his brothers' lives for 2 decades, they had not forgotten him. Caught off guard by the resistance of this Egyptian official, his brothers repeatedly referred to their sin of selling Joseph into slavery. In his dream earlier, he dreamed that stalks of wheat bowing down to him, and now in actuality, his brothers are bowing down to him, and they are bowing down to him because they want to purchase wheat from him. As Joseph recognized his brothers, he finds, maybe he's disappointed, that they do not at all recognize him as being their brother. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them, and then he accuses them, says, you are spies, you have come to see the nakedness of the land. we think of Israel as they're going to into the land of promise. Before they go in there, Moses sends 12 spies into the land to see what it's like. And it's not unusual for a nation to have spies coming in to see where their weaknesses are. So the brothers say to him, "No, my lord, your servants have come only to buy food. We're all sons of one man. We're honest. Your servants, we have never been spies. You know, what you think about us, it's not true at all." So what about Joseph's appearance? They did not recognize Joseph at all. In sending his sons to Egypt, Jacob unknowingly sends them to his son, to Jacob's son, Joseph. When they stood before the official responsible for the food supplies in Egypt, they unwittingly stood before their brother. They bowed to the ground out of desperation and respect for the official and his power over their lives. They're standing before the second most powerful man in the world at this time. But even after about 20 years, Joseph recognizes them immediately. Joseph's face-to-face encounter with his brothers does not present us with the reunion that we might have expected to occur at this time. Instead of welcoming them with tearful embraces or even a rage-filled threat, Joseph accuses his brothers 3 times of being spies. Such an accusation against a group of Canaanites would not have been unusual at this time. Egypt's surplus of grain in Joseph's day probably made them a target for the region's impoverished nations. The ancient Egyptians distrusted Canaanites in general and considered them to be uncivilized people. This narrative does not disclose Joseph's motives for his behavior toward his brothers, whether he acted befitting his office so as not to lose face in front of his Egyptian subjects, or whether he intended to take revenge against his brothers, or whether he was preparing for the moment in which he would revel in his dream coming true. But the brothers didn't recognize him. Remember, the last time they saw him, he was described as being a boy. He was 17 in the beginning of the story when he's out with his 4 brothers, but there might have been a year or 2 before he actually gets sold into slavery. And now they see him as a man, perhaps 38 years old at this time. You know, they're not standing in front of Joseph. They're standing in front of a man by the name of Zephanath-Paneah. They're dressed in, the brothers are dressed in Canaanite garb. He's dressed in linen with a headdress. His appearance, you know, he's clean shaving. Perhaps his head is shaved bald and everything. He's wearing fine clothing. He's now a man of 38. You know, he might be bigger, he might be muscular. And certainly part of his appearance, you know, his brothers, you know, they've been in a famine. And Joseph is second in charge of Egypt. He's probably been eating pretty well compared to them. His voice, from the time he's a boy until his time as a man, was different. And language. He was speaking Egyptian. He had an interpreter speaking to them. So he did not speak to them directly. We will learn that there is an interpreter. And also, we learn later, they believed Joseph to be dead. They didn't think he was alive anymore. So why would they think that this man is their brother Joseph when they believed that Joseph was dead? The accusation, "You are spies." Joseph's brothers were foreigners who had entered Egypt coming from the northeast. And the northeast was the land's most vulnerable border. Incursions into Egypt by Asians, or Canaanites that is, coming via the way of Horeth, the military highway from Canaan that led through Gaza to El Arish. That was a recurrent phenomenon. Frontier guards would be in guard stations along this way of Horus and routinely check every traveler that was coming into Egypt to make sure that they were not spies and make sure there would not be an imminent attack. An allegation of espionage provided Joseph with a convenient pretext under which he could have the brothers arrested and subjected to psychological pressure to test his brothers. Now, some of the feelings that Egyptians had about foreigners This is from the time of the 20th century BC, about the time of Abraham's sojourn into Egypt. From the prophecies of Nefertiti, he says, the land is burdened with misfortune because of those looking for food. Asiatics or Canaanites roaming the land. They're called foes who have risen in the east. The Asiatics, Canaanites have descended into Egypt. And also of 20th century BC, lo, the miserable Asiatic. He is wretched because of the place he's in, short of water, bare of food. Its paths are many and painful because of the mountains. He does not dwell in one place. Food propels his legs. Not only for himself, but for his livestock. They have to go where the pasturage is good. So Joseph continues, speaking through his interpreter. He said, no, it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see. And they, the brothers, said, we, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more. One is no more. That's a euphemism for saying that one is dead here, but later on explicitly, they will say that they believe that Joseph is dead. So there's 10 of them. They're saying there were 12, one is dead, and then the youngest one, he does not give the age of the youngest one, but he said one remains at home with his father. So here's that passage that says that they're dead. This is Judah speaking to Joseph. This is on the second trip during the second year of the famine when he goes back. It says, we have a father, an old man, and a young brother, the child of his old age. His brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him. Now this is still Judah speaking to Joseph through an interpreter. So how do you think Joseph feels, thinking that his brothers have pretty much written him off? They still have the guilt, but they think he's dead. They don't even think he's around anymore. But Joseph says to them, it is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you shall be tested, by the life of Pharaoh. Now, by the life of Pharaoh, this is an oath, and it was common at this time to do your oaths by the name of the king, by the life of the king, who was Pharaoh. You shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Imagine how they feel now. Is he saying, we can't leave unless our youngest brother comes here? Well, how is our youngest brother going to know to come here if we don't tell him he needs to come here? So you can imagine how they feel at this time. But Joseph will change the conditions of this deal later on. Now he says, son, send one of you, send, second person plural, you send one of you. You pick who goes back. So one of them is going to go back and bring the brother, and then the other 9 are going to remain confined here so that I can check out that your words are true and see if there's truth in you, or else, here's that oath again, by the life of the king, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. So they're in custody, they're in that roundhouse, and so they're going to be talking to one another. Remember, Joseph has contacts there in that roundhouse because he used to be in charge of it, so he can find out what they're talking about during that time they're in custody. See if they have changed. So reversal of fortune. Remember at the beginning here, Joseph, he's got his coat of many colors, his ornamental coat, and he's pretty much his father's second in command, keeping charge on his brothers. Then once he's up north, there in Dothan, his brothers put him in the pit, and now his brothers are over him. But now the tables have turned again, and Joseph is again on top, and then the brothers are in the pit now. So reversal of fortune twice. So after they've been in prison 3 days, Joseph he brings them out of prison, says, do this and you will live. not live because I'm giving you grain, but do this and you will live, you won't be charged with being spies, in which case you would be killed. For I fear God. If you're honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody. So it still sounds like, so now it's going to be changed. Only one remains and the 9 can go back. So at least those 9 can take some grain back. It still sounds like they get to pick the one. And bring your youngest brother to me so that your words will be verified and you shall not die. And they did so. So they're going to keep one brother, and then if they don't come back, that brother's going to die. So will they be willing to rescue that one brother, something they weren't willing to do for Joseph? So he's going to test them to see if they're willing to come back and get that one brother. Then they said to one another, and they're speaking in Joseph's presence, but they don't think he can understand them. So his not telling them that he can understand them, he can get some good intelligence from them because he can understand them, but they don't think he does. In truth, we are guilty concerning our brother in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us, and we did not listen to him. That is why this distress has come upon us. There's the idea of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, or what goes around comes around. We did this to our brother, and now God is punishing us for what we did to our brother. And Reuben answered to them. Now during this story of Joseph, only 2 of the brothers, Reuben and Jacob, Reuben and Judah, other than Joseph, only 3 of the brothers talk. In fact, we never even hear any dialogue from Benjamin, which is unusual. So Reuben answers them, the other brothers. He said, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. Now keep in mind that Joseph overhears this, and this is new information to him, because this happens out of his hearing. This is when they were away from the pit. Before they put Joseph in the pit and sold him, Reuben tried to get the brothers to not do this. They were going to kill him, but he says, don't kill him. Just put him here. So Joseph learns that Reuben was actually trying to come to his aid. After holding the brothers for 3 days, Joseph changed the plan that he had. He required that only one brother, rather than the 10, remain in custody, while the other 9 returned with the grain for their families. They were then to return with Benjamin to prove their honesty, or the brother being held would suffer death. Hearing this, the brothers began to talk among themselves. Where's this? Hearing this, the brothers began to talk among themselves, assuming that Joseph could not understand them. Even though 20 years had passed since they sold Joseph into slavery, the brothers immediately connected their present plight with their past behavior, agonizing how they had ignored Joseph's pleas for mercy when they had sold him. Reuben reminded them that he warned them against harming Joseph and that they had failed to listen to him. Okay, here we finally learn about the interpreter, which I had mentioned earlier. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. Then he turned away from them and wept. He returned to them and spoke to them. And he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. So you can imagine how their brothers must have felt at this time. That they're seeing him take their brother, and he is binding his hands, and he's going to take them off, and he's going to remain in prison until they return. And if they don't return, they will never see this brother again. Like he'll be to them like Joseph was. He's going to die, or at least they think. So Joseph gives orders to fill their bags with grain and replace every man's money in his sack and to give them provisions for the journey. This was done for them. So apparently they have bags there, and those are filled out of the sight of the brothers because they don't see what is being put into their sacks. That is, their money is being returned to them. So, why Simeon? Any ideas? Anyone out there in TV land?
I'm here, but I don't know.
Okay, why Simeon? Well, why not Reuben? He's the oldest. What did Joseph just hear about Reuben? That Reuben had. Go ahead.
That Reuben had opposed their plan to kill Joseph.
Yeah, Reuben was actually on his side. It would have naturally been to take Reuben. You know, he's the oldest. He should have been the most responsible. But Reuben had opposed the idea, and he took Simeon instead. So let's look at let's get a little bit of profile on the character of Simeon, okay? This goes back to Genesis 34. This is after, remember the brothers, they did have one sister by the name of Dinah, and she was taken by Shechem there, and he took her, I believe raped her, and then they made a deal, the citizens of Shechem made a deal with Jacob that as long as the Shechemites got circumcised, that they would intermarry with each other, and that they would trade within each other, so that the Shechemites agreed to the circumcision. And then while they were healing, Simeon and Levi came and by night and killed all the Shechemites. So Jacob was not happy with that, and then he says to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me a stink to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household." So as a result of this, you know, what Simeon and Levi did, Jacob and his entire clan had to move, and they were told by the Lord to then go to Bethel. And then here, Genesis 49, this is the blessing on the sons. This is Jacob speaking, and he says, "Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their sword." So violence. "Let my soul come not into their counsel, or my glory be joined to their company. For in anger they killed oxen, they hamstrung. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, their wrath, for it is cruel." So essentially, Simeon and Levi, they were hotheads. You know, they were quick to anger and quick to take action on their anger. And Simeon was the older of the two, so it's likely possible that Simeon was the one who urged Levi to help him in slaughtering the Shechemites after Jacob had made a treaty with them, essentially. So because of that, rabbinic tradition assigned to Simeon more guilt for the conspiracy to kill Joseph, noting Simeon and Levi had conspired to slaughter the Shechemites. So there was like three contingents in what to do with Joseph when they saw him coming. Reuben said, you know, don't do anything, don't harm the boy. Judah said, yeah, don't harm him, let's sell him. But Simeon was the contingent, let's kill him. But of the three, you know, don't do anything, let's sell him, let's kill him. Judah shows his leadership in here, in that his plan won out and they ended up selling him rather than doing nothing or killing him. And they loaded their donkeys with grain and departed. Another sack, one of them. So only one of them is opening the sack, and he apparently has the grain or the fodder. One of the donkeys has the fodder, and he's getting ready to feed the fodder. They were staying overnight at a lodging place. It's about a 4-day trip they're making. He saw his money in the mouth of his sack. He said to his brothers, my money has been put back in the sack. Here it is in the mouth of my sack. At this, their hearts failed them, and they trembled at one another, saying, what is this that God has done to us? So they think that this is God working on them. So they're wondering what, so they feel guilty here. So we're going to go back, and apparently we have to go back to Egypt, go get our brother and get more grain, and this is going to happen. One thing to keep in mind, one thing that Joseph knows that they don't know is that this famine is going to continue for 6 more years. They do not know that, but Joseph knows that. So he knows they're going to have to come back. If not for Simeon, they need to come back to get more grain. When they came to Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them, saying, the man, the Lord of the land, spoke roughly to us and took us to be spies of the land. But we said to him, we're honest men. We have never been spies. We're 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan. So the youngest in the land of Canaan. So Jacob really gets mad at them for telling them this, giving them this piece of information. Then the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, why? By this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me and take grain for the famine of your households and go on your way. Bring your youngest brother to me, then I shall know that you are not spies, but honest men, and I will deliver your brother to you, and you shall trade in the land. So this is essentially a recount to Jacob of what we already learned from Joseph. But one thing we're learned here is that once they've done this, then they are free. They can trade in the land all they want. So it's important that Joseph come back then just so that the family continue and so they can buy more grain. Because without Benjamin coming back with them, they will not be able to trade in the land, and they will lose their brother Simeon. As they empty their sacks, so now, remember, only one of them has been emptied so far. Now they're going to empty the other sacks. Behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were afraid. Remember, each man had their own money rather than, why not say, just one big bunch of money for everyone. In order to buy the amount of grain they had to appear as 10 separate families here, because there was probably rationing on the amount of grain they could bring back. So if just one man goes, he could not buy all the grain necessary for these families. By 10 people going, and each of them having their own money, it's clear to those selling the grain that they were selling to 10 families rather than to one family. And when they and their brother saw their bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob, their father, said to them, you guys have bereaved me of my children. Well, what did he mean by that? Joseph is no more. That's kind of interesting. How did they bereave him of Joseph? Maybe he's blaming them a little. You didn't take care of him. You allowed that animal to go after him, but that really wasn't their fault. Simeon is no more, so it's almost like he's writing Simeon off. Well, Simeon is only no more, Jacob, if you refuse to let Benjamin to go back. But apparently that's what he wants to do. He's willing to give up Simeon rather than to send Benjamin. And now you take Benjamin. You want to take Benjamin. All this has come against me. So Jacob is sort of having a pity party here. He doesn't know what's going on here. He thinks all this is against him, but really this is working for him, because send Benjamin back, and then Joseph will reconcile with the brothers, and then he'll bring all of you to Egypt, and then all of you will be saved. Then Reuben says to his father, here, Reuben is again involved. Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. That's not a good idea here. You think Jacob wants to kill his grandsons? Probably not. Bad idea, Reuben. Reuben also always seems to have the ideas that no one takes, you know. He wanted to save Joseph, the brothers overrule him. Now he's got this idea, you know, he's really making a passionate effort. I'll watch him kill my 2 sons if I don't bring him back to you. So you know Reuben's going to do his best to take care of him. Put him in my hands and I will bring him back to you. But he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead. His brother is dead. So, well, obviously Jacob thinks he's dead because he saw the blood on the coat. And he is the only one left. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you're to make, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow, down to Sheol. If harm should happen to him on the journey, what about all the other brothers? What about the other brothers? You know, how does that make them feel? You know, if harm should happen to Benjamin, I don't care what happens. Well, he does. He cares what happens to Simeon. He lost him, but it really makes it sound like Benjamin is more important than the other brothers. Okay, so that's the end of that. Next week the rain runs out, and they will have to make that decision to, you know, either send Benjamin or have no grain. And the phrases "we reap what we sow" and "what goes around comes around" are common in our culture. How does such a theme work in this story? Okay, you can unmute now. Do you see that in this story? What goes around comes around. You know, we saw that with the reversal of fortune twice, where where Joseph is up the top. He's in charge of his brothers, even though he's the second youngest. And then he gets put to the bottom when in the pit, when his brothers, when he goes to his brothers, and now they're in the pit, and then he's on top. So we do see that, but how does God's grace overturn this idea? How does Jacob's actions or Joseph's actions overturn this idea?
It ends with God showing Joseph that it's not just about the grace to save a family. This is God's grace to save a nation and provide a savior for the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
And
I think Joseph had plenty of time to figure that out. Perhaps in prison, and as he was elevated to be second only to Pharaoh, he now understands that he has become himself the savior of Jacob's family, his own family.
Mm-hmm.
And also savior of Egypt.
Yes, the Savior. And we think, Joseph doesn't take any actions. He forgives his brothers. You know, you'd think if you were Joseph at this situation, you'd want to go back and maybe meet Potiphar's wife in your new position. You think how scared she would be. And, I think about Jesus after his resurrection, those 40 days. I think if he was human and wanted to be vindictive, why didn't he go to a meeting of the Sanhedrin during those 40 days and say, "Hi, remember me? Remember when you judged me and found me guilty even though I was innocent? Well, let me tell you, I wasn't. And, oh, by the way, I'll see you guys on Judgment Day." Imagine how scared they would have been. But he wasn't vindictive. He basically only, during those 40 days, only went to visit his followers, as far as I know. Okay, there's the blue slide of ending. So next week we're going to be doing, of course, the grain that they bring back on their donkeys only lasts a certain amount of time. Perhaps Jacob was praying, hopefully this famine will be over with and we won't have to go back. But then there's the decision, am I going to be willing to give up my son Simeon? how long is he going to be safe there in the land of Egypt? You know, if I don't send him back soon, how long is this governor of Egypt going to be patient and spare the life of Simeon? So we get into that next week, and early on, Joseph still speaks through that interpreter, and it's not until he finally reveals himself that he will finally speak the same language that they do. But we didn't think about that. Joseph must have been very scared to be brought in that land, because in the early on, he could not even speak the language of the land. So going to a strange place, not being able, you're a slave and you can't speak the language of the land. So thank you for your comments. I have 9:45 now, and so thank you very much. And then next week will be chapter 43.
Thank you, Werner.
Thanks,
You're
Warner.
welcome.
Thanks, Warner.
You're welcome.
Great job as usual.
Thank you. Let me see if I can, am I stopped sharing?
There's a fence. What sharing means.
Oh, okay.
We see you.
You still see my slide there?